This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Continuing to talk about Roger McEowen's top 10 agricultural law and taxation developments in 2023 starts today's show. The K-State and Washburn law professor shares what number 6 and 7 are on the list. President of the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program at K-State, Jill Zimmerman, keeps the show rolling as she discusses how people can apply for the KARL program because applications are open for the next class. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd closes the show with information about overwintering and how insects protect themselves from extreme cold. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show with K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen as we continue talking about the top developments in agricultural law and taxation in 2023. Roger, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Roger, as we continue talking about these top developments, looking at your top 10 and today, talking about number 7 and number 6. And the first one, number 7, talks about $1 billion biofuel tax fraud conspiracy. And before we hop into that case, what is the renewable fuel standard that goes with this?
Well, the renewable fuel standard, which is basically at the bottom of the pyramid of the scam, was created in 2005 by the Congress, expanded in 2007. And what it does basically is say that certain fuels, and it's the majority of fuels in this country, have to contain a certain amount of renewable fuels in them. And the government, in order to incentivize this, offers lucrative subsidies and tax credits to companies that will convert crops such as beans and corn and other products into the so-called renewable fuels. And, of course, the most common of those is corn ethanol. And so that's what the standard is. It is requiring a certain amount of the fuel in this country to consist of what they refer to as renewable fuels.
And so how does this involve tax fraud?
Well, as part of the renewable fuel standard, biofuel production incentives known as RINs, or Renewable Identification Numbers, RINs. And under the EPA rules, a 38-digit number is designed to track each gallon of ethanol or biodiesel from the producer to the point of sale. Well, the ethanol RINs stay with the fuel until it's pumped by a consumer at the gas station, but biodiesel RINs can be sold separately as credits that can be traded. And so that allows oil refiners who fail to blend the government-mandated amount of biodiesel to buy RINs somewhere else to make up the difference without being fined. But because of that separation of the RINs from the fuel, that allows for the possibility that a RIN price could be negotiated by a biofuel company with an oil refiner with the company using a fake 38-digit number. So then the RIN buyer would then claim to have shipped the biofuel to be refined, but no fuel is actually bought or sold. And so if both the buyer and the seller are in on the scam, what they're doing is they're picking off those taxpayer subsidies, those tax credits, and producing nothing. That's what the scam is.
And Roger, what was this biggest scam that the renewable fuel standards has seen?
Well, we had a case in 2023 prosecuted by the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and they said it was their number one case of 2023, and also said it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, tax fraud case in U.S. history involving biofuels. So agriculture is right in the middle of this, unfortunately, and it's the biggest tax crime in the history of the United States. And the perpetrators here created the appearance of biodiesel production and sale to claim the tax credits. And it got away with it for a while. IRS actually paid out more than $511 million in credits to the biodiesel company that then distributed the proceeds among them as the company's owners. So you had 5 people that split this $511 of taxpayer dollars amongst them that they got for these credits. And they got long prison sentences. They pled guilty. They got caught. They pled guilty. And one conspirator got sentenced to 40 years in prison plus over $1 million in restitution and personal financial liability. Another one got 18 years in prison and more than $500 million in restitution. And another one got $338 million in personal financial liability. plus the prison sentences. And 3 others were sentenced to 12 and 7 and 6 years in prison each, and respectively, in order to pay over $500 million in restitution combined. So huge tax scam, huge penalties. But this has been a problem with the renewable fuel standard and these RINs for some time. They're just fraught with all kinds of fraud.
And on the topic of tax leads us into our number 6 development for 2023, and this one involving self-employment tax and limited partners. And first, teeing off with, what is a common question you get around self-employment tax planning, Roger?
Well, from a farmer is, how can I avoid paying it? They don't want to pay self-employment tax. In fact, I think how you know when a child is born whether they're going to grow up to be a farmer or not is that they're born with a chip in their head that says thou shalt not pay taxes, and especially thou shalt not pay self-employment taxes. So that's usually the question I get is, what can I do? How can I structure my business? How do I need to be operating to avoid paying self-employment tax? And that's particularly a big deal for older farmers that are fully vested in the Social Security system, and so paying in really doesn't help them anymore. It can be a dangerous strategy for younger farmers that aren't fully vested in the system because in addition to retirement benefits, there are also disability benefits that come along with Social Security. So once they're paid in, then we look at structuring the operation to accomplish a couple of goals. And one of those is to maximize farm program payments. Another one is to minimize tax, and particularly self-employment tax. And the vehicle that we often use to do that is some form of general partnership or a limited liability company that is treated like a partnership for tax purposes, and therefore we have a manager-managed company where we have a designated manager and we have non-managers or otherwise known as limited partners. Well, the rules set up by the Treasury Department back in 97 and then fully implemented by them from 98, even though Congress said you couldn't finalize the regulations. Congress never gave us a rule on this. So the Treasury and the IRS has just gone on with their proposed regulation. Under that, the details of that proposed regulation, we can have bifurcated interests in a manager-managed LLC where the distributions paid to the limited partners are not subject to self-employment tax. And as a general partnership, as an operating entity, this also gives us benefits from the federal farm program side of things, too. So we get a couple of twin benefits that most farmers often want. Now, we had a big case. My number 6 development is a big case out of the tax court on this issue in 2023. It came in late in 2023, right at the end of November, and it involved an investment firm out east on the East Coast that tried to do this and tried to argue that we set up a state law-defined limited partner interest for our limited partners. They shouldn't have to pay self-employment tax on their distributions. And the tax court said, no, that's not correct. It doesn't matter whether you have a state law-defined limited partner interest. What matters is what you're actually doing. And, oh, by the way, you can't do this if you are a personal services firm, such as an investment company or a hedge fund or something like that, or a CPA or an attorney. You can do it if you're a farmer, but you can't do it if you're a personal services business.
And so what could that look like being set up for a farming operation?
Well, for a farming operation, we would have the general partnership be the operating entity so that we're not limiting ourselves from a payment limitation standpoint. So if I'm a large enough operation, and depending on how I receive my subsidies, if I qualify for more than $125,000, which is the general payment limit right now, then what I can do is structure myself as a general partnership, and the limiteds, as well as the generals, I can get multiple payment limits if I qualify for them. And the distributions to my limited partners wouldn't be subject to self-employment tax, which solves that issue for farmers because they don't want to pay self-employment tax. And what the tax court is saying here with this Sorbonne Capital's partner case is they're going to follow the regs. Well, those regs are pretty useful for farmers and ranchers. We like that. So it's a big opinion by the tax court, even though it had nothing to do with agriculture. That regulation that's at issue in the case is very favorable to us in terms of structuring entities for farmers to minimize self-employment tax. That's why that's such a big deal, and that's why it's number 6 on my list.
As we're talking through all this different terminology and talking about taxes, what would you recommend producers do if they're thinking about how can I benefit my operation?
Well, on these issues, this is such a technical matter. They need to talk to their tax counsel, whether that's their CPA, tax preparer, whether it's their tax attorney. This is complicated stuff. This cannot be done on their own. They need to sit down and think through what the current structure is and whether that structure should be modified to provide a tax benefit without, or I would say not without, but consistent with farm program payment limitations if they're in the farm programs, transition planning, succession planning, overall estate planning goals and objectives. It's kind of a piece of the entire puzzle. You can't just take one piece out and ignore the other pieces. They have to all be integrated together. But it is very complex, and I'd say they need to get professional advice on it.
And if people would like to read more of your articles or see 8, 9, and 10 of the top developments in agricultural law and taxation, where can they do that?
These are posted on my blog, which can be accessed on Washburnlaw.edu/WALTR, as well as on the AgManager website through the Department of Ag Econ at K-State.
Roger, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and continue to share the top developments in agricultural law and taxation in 2023.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen discussing his recent article titled Top 10 Developments in Agricultural Law and Taxation in 2023, Part 2. And in this article, he discussed his number 6 and 7 of those top 10 developments. If you'd like to read this article, you can do so by going to Washburnlaw.edu/WALTR, or you can also find it on AgManager.info. I will link all these resources in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Thursday show discussing a program at K-State. And to talk about it, we're joined by President of the Kansas Agricultural and Rural Leadership Program at K-State, Jill Zimmerman. Jill, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, Shelby.
Jill, what is the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program, also often referred to as KARL?
KARL was founded in 1989 and by a group of agriculturists, and the vision at that time was to bring people together to create a legendary network of folks who, at the end of that 2-year experience, have a network of opportunities to connect with people, experiences, and places that hopefully at the end of the day allow them to go back home to their community, however we define that community, and be able to make change or to do the things necessary that allow our communities to be more successful.
And one of the reasons we're talking about KARL today is applications for the next class have opened up.
Absolutely. So they open January 1st, and we will take applications that will close on April 1st.
And it's not just anyone apply and get in. So what are some of those qualifications for applicants?
So really, there are qualifications, Shelby. Like, you want folks that care. You want folks that, care about their community, care about agriculture, and want to further develop a network that helps them be better people at the end of the day, better for their families, better for their careers. And so there's not like a rubric per se that says you have to check all of these boxes, but it does say that you need to care. And so you have to be between ages of 25 and 55. But I'll tell you, though, that we've exercised discretion in that in the current class we have folks that are both younger than 25 and also older than 55, because it's real about goodness of fit, right? You want to find a group of cohorts that really fit together. And the current class is amazing, right? They really come together well, and you just observe them and you appreciate it's a really robust conversation, and they're really tackling some issues.
Are there a few boxes that maybe participants should check before they take the time to apply?
I think as you think about applying for jobs, as you think about applying for to serve in your community in whatever aspect that would be, Shelby, when you apply to be a part of the KARL program, and applications are available on our website, you'll answer 3 questions about, discuss an issue that's important to agriculture today, discuss issues that are important to our rural communities today. Why do you want to be a part of KARL? And so Really, it's just you have demonstrated a commitment to learning. You've demonstrated a commitment to making our world a better place. And so if you've served in some form of capacity, or if you have a desire to be a lifelong learner and to have a greater impact upon yourself, those are the type of candidates and the type of applicants that we're really looking for.
Do people need to be from Kansas to be a part of the KARL program?
Yes.
What is the process like from submitting that application to what could be being accepted into the class?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we'll accept applications, like we said, up until April 1st. And then the first week of May, we'll do a series of interviews throughout the state of Kansas. And so Monday, we're in Northwest, Tuesday, we're in Southwest, and so on. And then we end up on Friday back here in Manhattan. And we'll interview in front of a group of board of directors and former fellows of the program. And from there, that group of people will make the selection. And so people make an application, they will screen those, and then they'll interview probably up to 45 interviews. We will be conducted that first week of April, last week of April, first week of May.
How many people are usually a part of the class?
So we'll take up to 30 applicants to be a part of the class. And so it's a competitive process, Shelby. And so you don't want to make light of that. And then it's a tuition based. And so the tuition covers a portion of the expenses for travel.
So how is that cost broken up for participants?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Shelby. So it is a tuition-based program. And so the tuition for both years is $5,600. And so $2,800 is payable in the first year, and then $2,800 is payable at the beginning of the second year.
And this is a 2-year process. And so what is the time commitment like for people who get selected?
So we say about 52 days over the course of 2 years. But, we'll travel to 10 in-state seminars throughout the state of Kansas, from Pittsburgh to Southwest Kansas to Goodland, Topeka, Leavenworth, Kansas City, Wichita. And then we also will spend a week in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. That's one experience. And then we'll also, in year 2, they will travel to Lincoln, Nebraska, and experience the Engler Agribusiness Entrepreneurship Program. So it's about 52 days over the course of the 2 years. And for in-state seminars, it starts Wednesday at noon approximately and ends Friday at noon. And that allows people to travel to and from.
You've mentioned quite a bit of travel. And what are the capstones for the class?
Oh, so the capstone are the most, capstone for year 1 is the Washington, D.C. Gettysburg Leadership Experience, which the Gettysburg Leadership Experience is where the participants in the class actually spend time on the battlefield, and then they'll go to the classroom and they'll talk about lessons on the battlefield that day from Gettysburg. And so it's an exceptional experience, and to watch that transformational leadership experience and what happens is super cool. And then so that's the capstone for year 1. And then year 2 is an international tour. So the current class will travel to Spain in March of 2024.
As someone who has been through the class, Jill, what did you get from it, and what do you hope maybe your classmates get from it as well?
I think it's amazing, and probably, Shelby, it impacts me more today than maybe what it did then, but I certainly wouldn't be where I am today had it not been for the KARL experience. I was one of the youngest that participated in the KARL class at that time. I think I was probably the 25-year-old in the room at that time, but it was the people that you meet along the way that make life exceptional, right? Those are the people that make life special. And we had a speaker last week in Wichita who has spoken to every KARL class since the beginning. And at the age of 72, he still captivated the room. Nobody was on their cell phones. Everybody's eyes were forward. People stopped eating. And so it was Judge Webb last week who spoke to the class. And so I think it's really that building a network, and it's really the creation of an opportunity to do more in life, because it's really like a continuation of college or a continuation of something. But it's really the robust network that you go through this experience with 30 people, and then you walk away feeling engaged, and you have a network to help build and make things better.
For the KARL program, you are able to nominate yourself, but are others able to nominate you if they think you're a good fit for it?
Absolutely. So folks can self-nominate themselves if they would like to be a part of the program. But also, I think some of the best things that agriculturists in Kansas can do for KARL is being aware of people in our communities that we think would be a good fit for the program. And Shelby, oftentimes it's just a nudge, right? Like, Shelby, I think you'd be great for the KARL program, and maybe you should consider it someday, kind of a conversation. And so I think just being aware of people in our communities that, that would be a good experience, and then just kind of encouraging them. Think about folks in your life that encouraged you to do things, and you're like, there was a reason why that happened.
How do people find out more information about the KARL program?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find out more information at KARL, KARL Program.com. And there's an Apply Nominate tab on the right side of the page.
Jill, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about the KARL program.
Thank you.
That was President of the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program at K-State, Jill Zimmerman. If you'd like to apply for this upcoming KARL class, you can do so by going to KARLprogram.com. That is KARL Program.com. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain and Secretary Tom Vilsack.
The familiar USDA grades for beef at your local grocery store or retailer are given by Agricultural Marketing Service graders. Now there is an effort to expand grading capabilities in a remote fashion. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack explained during a recent visit at the National Western Stock Show in Denver, Colorado.
We're announcing what we refer to as the remote grading pilot. It's going to be available to any processing facility that does not currently have a full or part-time grading system in place.
The pilot involves remote graders using plant photographs and videos to issue grades for beef cuts and carcasses. The Secretary notes a feasibility study on such a system, which occurred last year, involved 20 processing facilities.
We said, what if we trained people to take really good photographs of the carcass so that people grading it could see what they would see if they were looking at the carcass in real time? And what if that grader was someplace else and had a few minutes in the day to look at that photograph and to make a determination of, well, that looks like it's prime, that looks like it's select. And what if instead of charging $114 an hour, you just simply said to the grader, how many minutes did you spend looking at that photograph, making that determination? And the grader will say, well, 8 minutes. Well, that's a heck of a lot less than $114 an hour. That can be $15, $16 an hour. Now, all of a sudden, it makes financial sense.
As Secretary Vilsack says, that would create both cost savings and flexibility for small-size processors.
We're only going to charge the producer for the time spent reviewing the pictures and making the determination.
The Secretary also noted the importance of expanded access to the fee-based voluntary grading services for smaller facilities to increase the value-added component of their products.
Turns out that if you can put that choice label on it, you might be able to get $300 more for that carcass than you would otherwise get. More
information about the pilot program is available online at www.ams.usda.gov/services/remote-beef-grading. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That was USDA's Rod Bain and Secretary Tom Vilsack. I will link the resource that Rod mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. The impact that extremely cold weather might have on insects that overwinter may not be as big as you'd think. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd explains how insects are able to survive cold temperatures and emerge in the spring. Raymond, we're coming off one of those spells where we had, I guess either a polar vortex or some sort of Arctic freeze, but I think you're probably getting questions about what does this mean from an entomological standpoint.
Yeah, Jeff, I am. And this comes up every year, well, especially this year with the temperatures we've had below zero for a period of time. And I get the question generally revolves around how does the cold impact the insects? Well, number one, insects were here before us, and so they have evolved mechanisms that allow them to overcome cold temperatures. Number two is the snow cover. The snow cover acts as an insulation. So if they're in the soil where they overwinter, like grubs and some other insects, then the soil temperature is going to be much warmer than the ambient air temperature. So it acts as insulation. So insects and mites can overwinter as either eggs, larvae, pupa, and adults. Depends on which one it is. For example, bagworms overwinter as eggs in the bags, and that protects them. And so I thought I'd just bring up some notes about, what does overwintering mean? Overwintering is a physiological condition of growth retardation or rest that is primarily designed to overcome lower than optimal temperatures during winter. So as you know, insects are cold-blooded. They respond to temperature. We're warm-blooded. We have a constant temperature. So there's one thing. So what really impacts insects in terms of their activity is temperature and moisture, and actually a combination of those. But the way that insects can overcome winter is twofold. They come inside, just like the Asian ladybird beetle and crickets and centipedes and millipedes that come in, or they're outside. They can be in cracks and crevices of trees. They can be in fallen leaves or in debris. For example, squash bug overwinters as an adult in the debris. That's why we talk about sanitation, removing that so there's no hiding place. But let me explain a couple of terms that might help the audience. One is freeze tolerance. That's the ability to tolerate the formation of ice in the body tissues and fluids. Insects and mites convert 50% or more of their total body water into extracellular ice. So the second one is freeze intolerance, we also call avoidance. And that's the ability of insects and mites to survive low temperatures by means of supercooling, which I'll explain, stop feeding, and empty their digestive system before winter, because if there's anything in their stomach, Jeff, it'll freeze. And as you know, when water freezes, it expands and ruptures their gut. So that's why they do this. So they remove that so there's no formation of ice crystals. So I mentioned the term supercooling. Supercooling is a process of lowering the temperature of a liquid below the freezing point so the liquid does not become a solid. And that's what they do. So insects have various means. They also have these compounds called cryptoprotectants. They're basically polyols and carbohydrates. They have their own natural antifreeze. So that's another reason that they can survive. And so that's how insects survive, whether it be freeze tolerance, freeze avoidance, supercooling. They lower their body temperature such that they're not exposed to cold temperatures. Then I did mention the snow cover acts as insulation. And what I thought I'd do for the audience to help them, let's go over some of the insects that are common and how they overwinter. So bagworms overwinters eggs in the bags. That's why we say if you remove the bags, the female bags, you'll remove eggs. Aphids overwinters eggs. Elm leaf beetle overwinters adults. They come into homes. Grasshoppers overwinters eggs in the soil. Spider mites overwinters eggs or adults on weeds. The Japanese beetle overwinters as larvae pupa in the soil. And eastern tint caterpillar overwinters as eggs. Other insects like scale, and I have an extension publication called Scale Insect Pest, and in there is a table of how they overwinter. Most of them overwinter as fertilized females or immature females, but some overwinter as eggs. So in that publication, there's a chart entitled How Scale Insect Pests Overwinter, whether hard or soft scales. And the reason that's important is because if they overwinter as fertilized females, immature, you can use dormant oils in the wintertime now through about March, and that will kill those. Now, the ones that overwinter as eggs, like oyster shell, pine needle, are not bothered by dormant oils because you'll kill the outer surface of the eggs, and that protects the ones inside.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd with information on how insects overwinter. Next week, he looks more closely at the type of conditions necessary to impact insects that overwinter. If you have questions, contact your local county or district extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.